Today's bonus episode is all about how to avoid pregnancy naturally. That's right, it is entirely possible to avoid pregnancy naturally. And today we're talking about a few of the biomarkers that are available to you to know how to read your body and know when you're entering your fertile phase and when your fertile phase is closing during every cycle. As it turns out, you as a woman are not fertile every single day of your cycle. And in fact, you're only fertile for about 5 days, plus or minus 1 to 2 days of each cycle. And how are you able to know when you're fertile? Well, it all goes back to the fact that your body is a beautifully orchestrated your body is beautifully orchestrated. It's a beautifully orchestrated interrelationship of all of these moving parts and pieces, and you are so much more than matter. And there is a rhythm. There are multiple biological rhythms. Your circadian rhythm is one of them. Today, we're talking about your menstrual rhythm. And with your menstrual cycle, you have a natural rhythm of hormones, a natural hormonal rhythm throughout every single cycle. So starting on your first day of your period, because that's when we've chosen to say is cycle day one. And this is across the board, regardless. This would be cycle day one, kind of regardless of in which capacity you're speaking of your menstrual cycle, whether this is at a doctor's office, and here I mean a Western medicine doctor's office, or whether this is in relation to fertility awareness. And so day one of your cycle is the first day that you're bleeding. At this time in your cycle, estrogen and progesterone are very low. There are two additional hormones, luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone, which play a major role in your menstrual cycle. At this point in your cycle, FSH is medium. And so follicular stimulating hormone, what it does is stimulate the growth of new follicles, and these are potential eggs within your ovaries. Follicular stimulating hormone is medium on cycle day one, and it continues to be medium all the way until your estrogen starts to rise along about the middle of the first half of your cycle. Now, the first half of your cycle is known as the follicular phase of your cycle. And estrogen starts to rise along about the middle of that cycle, because at that time, the follicles, in every cycle, you have multiple follicles developing within your ovaries. At that time, a dominant follicle is selected. And what does this mean? Well, that dominant follicle is typically growing at a faster pace, and it's bigger than all of the other developing follicles for that cycle. And it's the follicles themselves that are releasing estrogen. And so while all of the follicles are releasing estrogen, starting on cycle day one, as they begin to grow, that estrogen is in very small quantities until a dominant follicle is selected. And at that point, estrogen production really takes off inside that dominant follicle, and it starts releasing more estrogen during this phase. And what this does is it sends feedback up to your brain, up to your pituitary, to stop production of follicular stimulating hormone. So at this point, follicular stimulating hormone drops, and all of those other growing follicles, they need follicular stimulating hormone to keep developing. This effectively starves those follicles of being able to further develop. And so they die in a process known as atresia. And at the same time, the dominant follicle for that cycle continues right on growing. And the reason for this, there's a couple of theories. One of those is that dominant follicle, because it's larger in size, it has more FSH receptors, so follicular stimulating hormone receptors on it. And so it's able to sequester any FSH that's remaining in your body. Another one is that just due to its size, it's able, and the fact that it has more FSH receptors, it's able to survive this duration of low FSH and, keep right on growing. So whichever one of those is true, Those are just a couple of the theories. That dominant follicle keeps right on maturing. It keeps right on releasing more and more estrogen up until the time of ovulation. And at ovulation, both your luteinizing hormone and also your follicular stimulating hormone surge. And this spurs the dominant follicle to release the egg. And at that point, the follicle, the hull that's left behind, essentially, becomes the corpus luteum, which is Latin for yellow body, and it begins producing progesterone. It actually produces both progesterone and estrogen. However, at this phase of your cycle, you've exited the follicular phase and you've entered the luteal phase. The demarcation for that is ovulation. And so in your luteal phase, progesterone is the dominant hormone, comparatively speaking. So estrogen rules the follicular phase, progesterone rules the luteal phase. And what this does, and then both in the second half of your cycle, in that luteal phase, luteinizing hormone, it only surges during ovulation. It drops back kind of to baseline. Follicular stimulating hormone also falls again after ovulation, and it typically continues to stay low for about the first week of your luteal phase, maybe a week and a half of your luteal phase, and then it'll start to climb again because estrogen isn't present to regulate it. So while you are producing estrogen during your luteal phase, it's really that relation of progesterone to estrogen, with progesterone being much more dominant during the luteal phase. And why go through what your hormones are doing? Well, because your hormones impact how your body behaves. Essentially, your hormones make changes to your body, and this is present in 4 different biomarkers that are used for fertility awareness. And here, when I use the term fertility awareness, regardless of whether you're trying to get pregnant or trying to avoid pregnancy, knowledge of your fertile window is why it's known as fertility awareness, because you are aware of when your fertile window opens and when it closes. And there are 4 different biomarkers that those hormones affect that, well, there's really more than 4. However, there are 4 that have been incorporated into fertility awareness methods. So one of those is your cervical fluid itself changes. So the quality of your cervical fluid and also the quantity of your cervical fluid changes in response to the levels of estrogen and progesterone that are present within your body. When estrogen levels are high, that cervical fluid changes and becomes estrogen quality or estrogen type cervical fluid. And this is a more fluid, actually, physically more fluid, as compared to a progesterone dominant, or a more correct term here would be a estrogen deficient cervical fluid. And estrogen deficient cervical fluid looks like sticky, very sticky, gummy quality cervical fluid. And what this does is it effectively acts as a plug to plug up your cervix, so that even if sperm are in your vagina, they're not able to pass through your cervix and hang out in your uterus, where their lifespan is extended because of the difference in pH between your vagina and your uterus. Sperm don't live for very long in the vagina. They can live for up to 7 days inside your uterus, but they have to get there first. And the way that they get there is when your fertile window opens. So when that dominant follicle is rapidly maturing and releasing lots of estrogen, then your cervical fluid is affected, and it allows for that the seminal fluid or the sperm to swim up through your cervix and reside in the cervical crypts or reside within your uterus. So where they're protected, they find safe harbor inside your uterus. So that is your cervical fluid is one biomarker. It's incorporated into a lot of different fertility awareness methods, including Creighton model, Billings ovulation method, even symptothermal methods like the one explained in Taking Charge of Your Fertility, the Justice method. So cervical fluid is at least a piece, if not the entirety of each of those methods, and how to monitor it and what changes in your cervical fluid indicate that you are fertile or infertile on this particular day of your cycle. The other thing that changes is your cervical position. So during most of your cycle, during the infertile parts of your cycle, your cervix itself is typically hard. It feels more like, the tip of your nose, more like cartilage. However, during your fertile window, it feels softer. And your cervix, you can think of it as a donut-shaped organ with a hole right in the center of it that separates your vagina from your uterus. And when you're close to ovulation, so when you're in your fertile phase, the opening in your cervix is actually wider. So this enables this, along with that really fertile quality cervical fluid, allows sperm easier penetration through the cervix up into the uterus. So that's the second biomarker. And it is typically an optional biomarker to evaluate in a number of fertility awareness methods. The third biomarker is one that you're not able to use for determining when your fertile window opens. However, you're able to use it to know and confirm when your fertile window closes, and that's your basal body temperature. Now, what is basal body temperature? Well, it's your rising body temp. It's your temp first thing in the morning, right when you wake up. The reason why it's so important to get your temp then is because your body temp is impacted by a wide range of things. And this includes when the last time you ate was, what you had to eat, when was the last time you exercised, how recent did you exercise, are you stressed right now, what's the room temp, what's the seasonal variation, is it winter, is it summer? Yeah, just a whole host of, how much sleep did you get last night? Did you have wine yesterday? Did you have any kind of alcohol yesterday evening? So all of these factors influence your body temp. And so the best way to kind of eliminate the noise and get a consistent reading on body temp is to take it first thing in the morning. And typically this is taken by placing a thermometer under your tongue. However, nowadays there's all sorts of wearable devices. There's the tip drop and the Ava Women's bracelet and about 100 other wearable devices to get your body temp. OB-Sense makes several as well. So anyways, now why this is important is because, comparatively speaking, while estrogen and progesterone are both very yin, so very feminine hormones, estrogen is a much more yin. So estrogen is like the yin of the yin. It's the most feminine hormone in the body, essentially. Whereas progesterone is a more masculine yin. So even though it's still yin, it has more yang qualities. So progesterone is a hotter hormone than estrogen. This means that your body temp runs higher during the second half of your cycle than it does during the first half of your cycle. And so what happens is after you ovulate, assuming that your progesterone production is normal, you'll see a shift. Okay, assuming that your progesterone production is normal and you don't have an underlying condition and or are not taking any kind of meds that impact your cortisol levels or your thyroid hormone levels, then what you would expect to see is a rise in your basal body temp. And most of these fertility awareness methods use this, so they add an algorithm around that rise in body temp, so that you're able to determine whether or not it's a distinct enough shift and it's of long enough duration to confirm ovulation. And if it is, then you know that your fertile window is closed after a 3-day sustained rise in your basal body temp. Again, all of these fertility awareness methods talk about how to determine, if it qualifies as a sustained thermal shift, because it does have to be a rise of typically at least 0.3 degrees. And again, that's discussed in these fertility awareness methods. So that's the third biomarker. The fourth biomarker, now this one right now is not, well, okay, yeah, right now it's not included in any fertility awareness method that I'm aware of. However, there are multiple devices on the market. Actually, one just came off the market because sales were low, not because it doesn't work, but because sales were low. And that is conductivity testing. So and here when I say conductivity, I'm talking conductivity is something that's impacted by electrolyte balance. Conductivity testing is something that's rarely talked about outside of the scientific community. However, electrolyte balance, I think that's something we all know what is. And so essentially conductivity is a way of testing your body's electrolyte balance. Your electrolyte balance changes from your follicular phase to your luteal phase. It changes during your fertile window. So this is some of these devices measure the conductivity of your saliva. Some of them measure the conductivity inside your vagina. So you would insert a probe into your vagina and get a relatively quick conductivity reading. It's not like you're walking around wearing it for a while. You just you put it in there and it's a relatively quick reading. And then those are plotted on a graph, and actually you can use the chart, the pattern of the observed pattern to know when your fertile phase opens, and then also confirm when it closes during every cycle. So that's a fourth biomarker. A few other ones, these are ones especially that the AVA women's bracelet monitors would be your breathing rate changes throughout your cycle, your heart rate variability changes throughout your cycle. And this is something that happens consistently in an observable way, in a predictable way, so that the monitor itself can use an algorithm to figure out when you're entering your fertile window and again when you're leaving your fertile window. This is something that again isn't incorporated right now into any fertility awareness based method that's available. It's not incorporated into fertility awareness based method protocol. However, it is something that's really interesting to know that you are able to monitor all of these things to know when your fertile window opens and closes. So this brings us to like biomarker number 6 or something, which is you're also able to just directly monitor your hormone levels at home every single day by peeing into a cup. There are a number of fertility awareness monitors, at home hormone monitors on the market right now. The Clearblue Fertility Monitor is one that gives you a qualitative reading, so you know whether your estrogen is low, high, or whether your luteinizing hormone is surging. There is the Mira, and I just found out about another one recently known as the Anito monitor, that give you a quantitative value. So this is an actual number for your estrogen, your progesterone, your luteinizing hormone, and your follicular stimulating hormone throughout your cycle. So these are being researched, and well, ultimately the Marquette method or any kind of sympto-hormonal method would use one of those fertility monitors. Some of them are fairly new to the market, and so research is still ongoing to adapt protocols and include those new monitors into the method. Some of those have been on the market for long enough that there's already existing protocols for how to use it. So all of this is to say there are a ton, at least 6 different. Oh, and the other thing that we didn't even talk about is when you're like the length of your cycle. So the length of your cycle itself is another biomarker. So this is, now the 7th biomarker that we've talked about in this conversation. And the length of your cycle itself feeds into old methods, old fertility awareness methods, ones that have been around for quite some time. And here I'm talking the standard days method, the rhythm method, the calendar method, any kind of calendar-based method. This is also applicable to a couple of FDA-approved apps for natural contraception, most notably the Natural Cycles app and the Clue app. So anyway, yes, there are FDA-approved apps for contraception. So anyways, we just covered a ton of information in a relatively short time. Just to quickly recap, well, actually, before we recap, another note on all of these biomarkers. So right now, currently, there are, to my knowledge, I think I'm going to underestimate this. I'm going to say a dozen. I think it's more like 15. And there's probably quite a few more that I don't know about yet. So a dozen to 15 different fertility awareness methods. And here, when I say fertility awareness methods, I'm talking about the calendar-based ones. I'm talking about the cervical fluid monitoring ones, the sympto-hormonal ones, like the Marquette method, the at-home hormone monitoring, and then also the symptothermal ones. So this is a combination of cervical fluid plus basal body temp. So with all of these methods, there is the key takeaway from this episode is there is a ton of science. I would not be sitting here talking to you about natural contraception using fertility awareness-based methods if there were not a ton of science behind it. I mean, I am a scientist. I'm a pharmaceutical formulation scientist, formulation development scientist. So, and have been in that field for a decade now, although it's been 20 years since I've graduated college. So, I've worked as a scientist for 2 decades. So, with all of this, like the calendar-based methods are kind of the antiquated ones. Then in steps the Billings ovulation method. So if I have my dates right, this was something that was discovered or really brought to the forefront by an Australian couple, Bill and Evelyn Billings, back in the 1950s. And what happened after that is, in case you're listening and doubt that church and science can be used together in one sentence, or religion and science go together in any capacity, what happened is Dr. Thomas Hilgers stepped in to put scientific boundaries around the Billings ovulation method and to really standardize that method, because he saw the value of understanding a woman's reproductive cycle in order to achieve natural family planning, so that you're able to get pregnant when you want and avoid pregnancy when you want. So Dr. Thomas Hilgers stepped in, and I mean, he developed the Creighton model and essentially, I would say, revolutionized fertility awareness methods, because not only did he standardize the Billings ovulation method, the Billings ovulation method itself is one fertility awareness method that monitors cervical fluid quality, or monitors cervical fluid production, and is able to let you know when you're entering and leaving your fertile window. Dr. Hilgers also, in the whole Creighton model, beyond him, that the whole work around the Creighton model took this a step further and developed natural procreative technology, which is expanded into the medical field. And so there are medical practitioners who are aware of how to read your cycle, how to know when your fertile phase is. And what this does is give extremely valuable information on, is there something weird going on with your luteal phase? If you have a luteal phase deficiency, and again, this is the second half of your cycle, what type is it? There are, 4, actually, I think there's 5 different types of luteal phase deficiencies. 4 are pretty well understood at this point. The 5th is one that there's more research being done in. And so what you're able to do is work with these NAPRO physicians and NAPRO trained physicians in order to figure out what's going on with your cycle, and in order to decide a treatment plan to help you achieve a healthier cycle. You know, whether this looks like diet and lifestyle changes, whether this looks like any kind of hormonal treatment. And here, when I say hormonal treatment, I'm talking about bioidentical hormone treatment for short durations in order to get your cycle back to what a healthy cycle should be, or whether this is something like surgery. However, it's appropriately timing those surgeries, appropriately timing those diagnostic procedures in order to actually diagnose you with whatever condition that you're looking for. And yes, it really matters what day of your cycle, you know, these activities happen. Like, it absolutely matters. So this is going beyond fertility awareness into just overall health, an overall healthy cycle, and overall understanding of your cycle, because I guarantee you, like, there's a 99.9% chance your GYN does not know this information. So Creighton, again, Dr. Hilgers and the, I'm going to have it wrong, Pope John Paul I want to say the sixth, Institute stepped in, revolutionized, you know, brought so much science, so much understanding, did a ton of research into how the female body works, how female reproduction works, developed this whole NAPRO technology, which again is the medical side of fertility awareness. And then from there, it's just expanded. The Marquette method, any kind of symptohormonal method, is something that's relatively new to the scene over the past couple of decades. You know, the Creighton model was something in the kind of the 70s is when it kind of started big time, took probably until the 80s to, you know, flesh a lot of that out. Then the Marquette method started working in the 90s with like the Clear Blue fertility monitor, for instance, and has just continued to revolutionize fertility awareness. This is so much better. This is so much better than relying on hormonal contraception for birth control. This is so much better than relying on a copper IUD, which copper it promotes inflammation within your body. Do you want constant inflammation within your uterus for your entire reproductive life? Copper IUD is also linked to heavier periods. Is linked to more painful periods. So if you want a natural alternative to this, fertility awareness is it. And it's entirely possible to avoid pregnancy naturally. I myself have been doing it. I'm in my 40s. I'm in that quote unquote perimenopause period, although I would say right now my cycles look strikingly normal, even after 20 plus years on birth control. A number of other women are doing it. Jess over at Charting with Jess Strubitsky, she's been doing it for years. She has PCOS. The NFP pharmacist, Emily Kirkwald, she's been doing it for years. You know, she planned her pregnancies around it. She planned when not to get pregnant around it. Lisa Hendrickson Jack over at Fertility Friday, she's another one. I mean, this field is huge. And if you want more, Rain Organica is offering a course all about fertility awareness for natural contraception. The beauty of this course is it walks you through all of the fertility awareness-based methods available to you, all of the big ones, the Justice method, the Marquette method, the Creighton model, Billings ovulation method. It walks you through all of those. And it talks about the differences between cervical fluid monitoring only, between at-home hormone monitoring, and gives you guidance so that you're able to make an informed choice on which one of these works best for you at this stage in your life so that you're able to, make the best decision for you on which method would work best for you, again, at this stage in your life. That course or that program, it's a self-study program. It includes 4 standard protocols for 4 of the different fertility awareness-based methods. It also includes the Marquette method for postpartum. So this is a myth that if you are breastfeeding, you can't get pregnant. That is not true. You cannot get pregnant for the first 56 days of breastfeeding. And after that, it's wide open, where your fertility may return at any time after that first 56 days of breastfeeding. So it's really important to implement a fertility awareness method. And I think it's extremely important if you're breastfeeding, because of, at that point, you definitely want to avoid hormonal birth control just for the health of your baby. And yeah, I know there's a bunch of research saying it doesn't matter, but anyways, so so that program also includes the Marquette method for postpartum tracking, or the postpartum protocol, the Marquette method postpartum protocol for pregnancy avoidance. And as part of that, you'll get access to me to ask your questions via email. Of course, share your charts in the event that that you can't make heads or tails of them. The other beauty of this program is it includes sample charts for you to walk through, so you're able to try your hand at charting, and this further helps you decide which method is right for you. If you're interested in that, click that link for more info. All right. Thank you so much for listening. This was a bonus episode. And next time on the show, we are talking all about thyroid health and specifically the things that I've learned on the 4+ years of my journey with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Until next time, bye. If you found today's episode helpful, if you know someone who might want to sign up for that program, go ahead and take a quick second, send this link over to them. Also, if you would be so kind as to leave a 5-star review, it would mean the world to me. As always, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, bye.